Good afternoon and welcome to this session where we're going to be talking a little bit about third-party software maintenance. My name is Rob Paddon. I'm the Territory Manager for the Public Sector UK and Ireland for Origina, and I have the great pleasure to be joined today by Michelle Williams, who is the Senior Software Asset Manager for Department for Work and Pensions. Michelle, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So, before we pitch into anything around third-party software support, I know everyone is aware of Department for Work and Pensions. I guess not everyone's aware of quite how big the department is and how much you do. Could you maybe just give us a little bit of context in terms of the kind of sheer scale of the operation?
Yeah, okay, so at the Department for Work and Pensions, we have 20 million customers that access our services, so we pay benefits out to pretty much everyone that lives in the UK at some point in their lives. Most people claim retirement pension, but along the way, there's all sorts of different other benefits that we pay. And so everyone has some sort of contact with us at some point in their lives. 20 million customers at any one time requires a lot of background work that happens. And we've got around 130,000 staff that work for DWP, all with the required resources that in the background and the software that comes along with that.
So I'm guessing that translates into a fairly significant IT setup and investment.
It absolutely does.
Can you give us just an idea of what we're talking about, because it is big?
It is big, yeah. We have, like I say, 130,000 users, all requiring hardware there, which all requires software, as we know, on that hardware for those users. But the bigger picture there is the fact that we've got those 20 million customers at any one time, and we've got a lot of software out there that supports that and supports the use of that. All sorts of different applications for all the different benefits. There's vast amounts of benefits that are paid to people, some legacy ones, and then obviously the new ones when it comes to universal credit. We've got 2 server estates that we have on-premise, and they're also quite vast, and we're moving towards putting lots of the newer stuff into cloud and everything that comes along with that. I manage all the software for DWP. Anything that we have comes through my team, and there is an awful lot in there. It keeps us really busy, looking at renewals of software and looking at how we can get the best value out of that.
So, what sort of general strategy is DWP following from an IT perspective? What are the big sort of trends and things you're focused on?
So the strategy is to look at cloud-based, moving things towards the cloud. And that's something that we're supporting in, and we're helping all areas of the business look at what their options are for software when it comes to that. But also we've got our legacy benefits and our legacy applications that are also really important. When we look at those, we have to remember that they're things that are supporting vulnerable people, and so we can't leave them to the side. So the strategy there, and I think where the third-party support comes in, is that we don't leave them and we don't let them suffer. They're equally important, and so what we're looking at, and with this conversation here, is looking at how we can get better value out of that legacy, those legacy benefits and the legacy software as well.
All right, so those are big systems that are running things that are key critical for people.
Absolutely.
They may not be long-term strategy for the future, but they support the business.
Right, yeah.
They have to be stable. They have
Absolutely.
to work really, really well.
And
they have to be secure. You know.
And the vulnerable people is the key there.
Yeah.
You know, we can't ever let any of those applications suffer.
Are there any sort of really big, sort of notable projects that are happening at the moment that might be interesting for people?
Well, so if we think, there is a recent project that's just completed where we've looked at quite a lot of the legacy benefits, moving them over to in-house applications. It was called the VMER program, and that's been a really big project that's gone on, and to look at how we can get better value out of that and use the software that we've got, looking at what our perpetual licenses are and how we can use those in those projects. And the same if we're looking at all the cloud-based projects that are happening at the moment, looking at bringing our own license to those and how we can get really good value out of that.
Okay, so reusing what you got as much as you can,
yeah.
getting as much value out of the asset as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know we've had this conversation, and I think it might be interesting for people. Software asset management, working with IT, I know that hasn't always been easy or smooth,
No,
and it's been. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe? And because I know you've had some really good experiences.
Yeah, so, when we're looking, people out there, there's like I said before, 130,000 people that work in DWP, and most of those work out in operations. But we've got a really big digital team that work in DWP, and there's a lot of focus on the new products and the fancy things that we could work with. And what we want to do is try and keep the spend down on that whilst allowing people to be innovative. And so we have to come up with quite fancy ways of doing that, allowing people to be innovative and look at all the things that they can do, but while using, like we said before, while using what we've got. And so stakeholder management is really key for us, and understanding our internal customers, understanding what their needs are and what the demands are for them, and how we can support them to be able to be innovative whilst also keeping an eye on our spend and keeping an eye on how we can protect the taxpayers' purse.
So, I mean, you've been with Department for Work and Pensions for a very long time. I mean, not that long, obviously, but
Very long
for a
time.
while.
Yeah.
And I know you started off right at the sharp end. And moved through various guys. Has that helped you, do you think, in terms of understanding people's needs and how that relates to software asset management, how it relates to IT?
It does. So I started in, actually, a legacy benefit. I worked in that legacy benefit for 18 years. And I know it was carers allowance, and, the carers there that get paid that benefit, I understand how little attention gets given to that. It's not politically important. It's a really small benefit in the grand scheme of things. And I know how important that those systems are stable, that those people can be paid, those claims can be processed, and it's incredibly important. Really vulnerable people that are out there supporting disabled people in the community, saving money by providing that support, and we support them. And I know how important that is. I've also been the manager of a job centre, so they're looking at universal credit, and that gets a lot more profile and is a lot more out there, and gets a lot more money spent on that to ensure that's the future, and that, very much not a legacy benefit, the future. And again, really vulnerable people in our community, and when people make a claim to benefit, it can be because of a big change in their life, and the job centres out there, they're the first line of support for people quite often. And so, it's really, really important that we have that. We can pay people on time, and that we have the ability to use software and use it effectively and efficiently.
And in the world we work in, which is very much aimed at, it's an IBM, it's an HCL world that we operate in, and it's very much at a platform level, not at an application level. And one of the things we're always really keen to do is to understand the impact that the platforms have on the applications, on the business, the operational side of things. And it's bringing those IT, user, operational, finance people all together into a single place that things start to get interesting in terms of what we can really add.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, you are a customer of ours. What was it that led you to start looking at third-party maintenance as an option? It's not a mainstream thing that immediately comes to mind. So what was it that led you in that direction to start with, Michelle?
So we had quite a large IBM estate, and like I've said before, that it's legacy software, and it supports a lot of legacy benefits. And it's really difficult to find ways to save money and to get best value out of that, especially when it's not politically a priority, and it's not something that has necessarily a long roadmap that would encourage a lot of investment. So you have to be quite strategic in that and look at different ways that you can look at saving money and think about what the best value is. Now, I talked before about the importance of things being stable. What we also wanted to look at was getting a good quality of support. Now, not that IBM don't provide a good quality support, but what we wanted was a more focused support in that area, rather than it being a little bit dismissed in the sense that it was old systems, and that's. It was it was commercial, and it was strategic for us to think about saving money, but getting better value for money is a thing as well. Not always about things being cheaper, but getting more for your money.
So if you were to kind of say what were the success things, what were you looking to achieve, as well as value for money and sort of services? Are there other things that you were hoping at the end of that you would be able to point to, say that was successful?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to do was to really understand our IBM estate and understand the people that out in the business that were using it, And so what we initially did when we were looking at moving some of our support to Origina was to really understand the roadmaps of people that were out there on the estate. And some of the software that we do have supported now with Origina was from one of the legacy benefits. And I took the time really to understand that stakeholders' requirements, because that's really important. If we're trying to ask our stakeholder to take a risk, to break from the norm and do something that might be a little bit different, then understanding what their needs are and making sure it was right for them is a really big thing. And so having those conversations and reassuring and providing them support was key. And it's been a really good opportunity for me to build those relationships with those stakeholders, because it gives me a view, a much clearer view of their future roadmap and a stronger relationship with them.
And what was the process that you followed for the procurement? Was there a specific process that you followed, or how did that progress?
The process for me was winning over the stakeholder and looking at the risks. And that was when we came to our governance and when we were selling this to senior leaders. I really wanted to make sure that we could do that we could consider all the risks and really understand them. So having conversations with the areas of the business and understanding what the risks were. We spoke to Gartner about the risks and what the options were there. The procurement, I don't work in procurement, but I worked alongside the procurement team, and we spent a lot of time talking through the risks, because we are quite risk averse, and this was a big, this move was quite a big risk for us to make sure that we understood that. Now, how they went about procuring, I'm not too sure, but yeah, very much supported our commercial team in that.
And who are the key people that had to be involved in this? Because obviously it touches a lot of different departments. So
yeah, so there were senior leaders in the legacy benefits. They had been speaking to IBM. IBM had tried to steer the conversation back to is perhaps not moving away from them. So we had to reassure them. The lower level people that were working in those benefits, the techie guys, talking to them about what they might encounter and what our risk mitigations were, but also our own senior leaders. So it was quite a big deal for us to make this move and to move away from the traditional IBM support in that sense. And so winning over our senior leaders to our bigger strategy was a big conversation as well. And as a much wider picture about whether as a department it was a strategy that we wanted to take with our software to consider third-party support in the future.
And were there any mega barriers? Were there any people throwing up this ginormous sort of thing that said, this can't possibly work?
The techie guys, yeah. They were my mega barriers, so they really wanted to protect what they had. They wanted to be really confident in that they could deliver a service and that they would get the same level of support. Now, what we wanted to ensure was that they got better levels of support than they did before, but they weren't bothered about that. They just wanted to make sure that they could still have everything that they had before. And what I had to do was win over their trust and make sure that I could be confident in you that you would provide that better level of support. And that's where we work with our commercial teams to make the contract, to make sure that was right. But those techie guys, they were the ones I had to win over. And for my benefit, really, because I have a much closer relationship with them now and a better understanding of their roadmaps.
Okay. So if someone either in the audience here or watching was thinking about doing this, what would you advise them? How would you advise them to start, and what would you sort of take as learning that maybe was a bit harder than it needed to be? Or
yeah. So the two key things that stand out for me, the first one is understanding your risks. There are risks. This isn't always a straightforward option. You need to really understand what's out there on your estate and what's being used and why. It's really important to understand that. If you're wanting lots of upgrades and things are progressing in the future, think about how you'll manage that, what your dependencies are, and have those conversations with the people that use those as to how that would work. Understand your risks and understand what your mitigations are for those risks. Quite often, you can put good mitigations in place that make your risk much, much lower than they appeared to be initially. Secondly, and I've talked about this quite a bit now, but the stakeholder management, getting the trust of the people that you're asking to make this move is key. And I think if I was going through this process again, I would start that much earlier and really start talking through those risks with that area and talking through it with the business with your business contacts. I think that was really a really key thing for me. And when I look at this contract that we have, the best benefit for me from that is the relationships I've built and how we've been able to deliver a much better level of service than they had before, and how that's built good relationships with the stakeholders.
Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. If there are any questions for anybody who's actually in the audience, we can have a chat about that, if there's anyone who wants to ask anything. No? Okay, obviously very clear. Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's been valuable to everybody, and thanks for your time.